Hello, and welcome to Real Cheating Story. I'm Paul Scott. I'm 5'11", 170 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. My early years were spent in California's Central Valley, not far from Fresno. My family and I lived in a double-wide trailer. My mom, my two younger siblings, brother Eric and sister Janet, and me. Our trailer was on the edge of a mobile home park, about 500 feet from the Southern Pacific Railroad tracks. Every evening, when Mom returned from her shift as a cashier at Bart's supermarket around 5:30 p.m., she'd start preparing supper. The 6 p.m. freight train rumbling past was our cue to wrap up our playtime, go inside, and set the table. We moved into the trailer after my father, Jack Scott, divorced my mom and left to live with his girlfriend. From that point on, Mom was the one raising us, with only minimal child support coming from Dad, who otherwise wasn't involved in our lives. Despite the challenges of a single-parent household, my sister and I managed to stay on track and get through high school and college. Thanks to a modest academic scholarship, I graduated with a BA in marketing, while my sister earned a more substantial scholarship and eventually got her law degree. My younger brother Eric, however, took a different path. Although my sister got along well with him, Eric and I weren't particularly close. For reasons I didn't quite understand, he seemed to be somewhat resentful of my career achievements. With his blonde hair and blue eyes, he was clearly the better-looking sibling, and he did well enough in jobs like grocery stocking in high school and later residential construction. However, he seemed less motivated to advance in his career. He did okay financially, but our income levels were worlds apart. Timing worked out well for me in 1985, when I landed a marketing associate role at a California startup that eventually grew into a major online company. 16 years later, I had the good fortune of being part of the team when the company was acquired by a global media giant. By then, I was a vice president of marketing, and I left with a substantial stock option package and severance. In other words, it was enough for me to buy a house for my mom, travel, and live comfortably. However, life took a turn when my marriage ended, and the financial outcome wasn't in my favor. I have to hand it to Tiffany. She timed everything perfectly. Since we'd gotten married just weeks before my severance payout, half of my newly acquired fortune was now hers. Additionally, in the settlement, I gave her the paid-off deed to the house and transferred the title of my beloved Porsche to her name, in exchange for no alimony. It would have also meant 18 years of child support for Paul Jr., if not for my lawyer wisely insisting on a DNA test. Shockingly, the test revealed that my son was actually my nephew. Turns out Tiffany's affair partner and the actual father was my younger brother, Eric, who was married with 2 kids of his own. This revelation was a heartbreak. The 3 months I spent caring for Paul Jr. were some of the happiest of my life, and losing him was more painful than losing Tiffany. It made me realize how much I valued being a father. It also stirred up old feelings about my own father. If being a dad was so fulfilling, why had he abandoned my siblings and me? I made it a goal to visit my father's grave after he passed and make my peace with it. At least my brother didn't walk away unscathed. Tiffany had not only shattered my family but also Eric's. The same week that Paul Jr.'s DNA results came out, Eric's wife, Amrita, took their daughters and returned to India to live with her parents. Thanks to my lawyer, I avoided child support, and the court ordered my name to be removed from Paul Jr.'s birth certificate and replaced with Eric's. Unfortunately, Paul Jr. was no longer Paul Jr. He was just Little Paul. Overall, it had been a miserable year. Little Paul had been born in April. I discovered the affair in mid-June after hiring a private investigator, and I filed for divorce the first week of July, which was finalized in August and took effect in March the following year. Depressed and filled with self-doubt, I left behind the wreckage of my former life and headed to New Mexico to start fresh. Why New Mexico? Primarily because it was ranked as one of the most affordable states to live in. I wasn't exactly broke, but given my upbringing, I wanted to make my remaining money last as long as possible. Before leaving, I allowed myself one splurge. Out of nostalgia, I bought a mechanically restored white 1974 Volkswagen transporter van, similar to the one I drove in high school and college. While the mechanical parts were restored, the body was rough and patina covered, with worn interior panels. It was perfect. I needed it to be reliable, not pretty. If it looked old and battered, no one would want to steal it. Starting from California, I drove roughly 950 miles through Arizona and into New Mexico until I reached Gallup. I completed the trip in 2 days, spending one night in the van at a truck stop in Kingman, Arizona, a spot that was popular for Hollywood westerns back in the 1940s and 1950s. Gallup had a population of about 21,000, with an average income of around $35,000. It was not too big, not too small, and affordable, making it a perfect choice. Once in Gallup, I spent one night at a cheap hotel. The next day, I drove around looking at mobile home parks. I found a single-wide, one-bedroom, one-bath trailer with an attached carport at Western Skies Mobile Home Park. The mobile home was weather-beaten on the outside, but the roof was solid, and it was furnished inside. After writing a check for $5,273, it was all mine. As I was unpacking, I noticed my neighbor in the next trailer over. A petite woman with long dark hair, parted in the middle and tied into a ponytail. Wanting to make a friendly first impression and craving the company of someone I could trust, I ran out to pick up a small bouquet and some freshly made sugar cookies from the local La Manonita market. Equipped with these tokens of neighborliness, I went over and knocked on her screen door. A small boy with jet black hair and sun-kissed skin from playing outside answered. I introduced myself. "Hello, I'm your new neighbor, Paul, and I came to say hello." He didn't say a word and just looked at me as if I was some kind of unusual curiosity. Then the woman I'd seen earlier came up behind him, her expression cautious. "Can I help you?" she asked. She was even smaller than I'd first thought, maybe 411, 85 pounds, wearing a simple, light blue dress and rubber sandals. Her accent and appearance suggested she might be Filipina. She offered me a half-smile, though the left side of her face drooped slightly, possibly from some nerve damage. She wore budget-framed glasses held together with duct tape across the bridge, and her left eyelid sagged a bit as well. None of this diminished her looks to me. I found her very pretty, and for the first time in 2 months, I felt a glimmer of optimism. Turning on my best friendly charm, I reintroduced myself. "Hi, I was just telling your son I'm your new neighbor, Paul, and came over to say hello." Her warm brown eyes met mine, and I nearly forgot about the gifts in my hands. "These flowers and cookies are for you," I added, holding them out. Her suspicion softened into a genuine smile as she accepted them. "Thank you, that's very kind of you. I'm Aurora Santos, but my friends call me Dawn." She nodded toward her son, who was still staring at me intently. "This is Jacob. He's 4. Don't mind him. He tends to stare at men since his father left." She invited me in and made coffee while Jacob enjoyed the cookies. As we chatted, she shared that her ex-husband was in jail for domestic abuse, which was why she divorced him. She told me he'd gotten violent while drinking, leading to the nerve damage that caused her subtle physical symptoms. Aurora explained that, with only a high school education, she worked as a cashier at a drugstore, taking the bus to work since she didn't have a car. Her job didn't pay much, so she supplemented her income with food assistance. I, in turn, shared how I was newly divorced, my ex-wife having left me with a significantly reduced fortune after her betrayal, and how the loss I felt most keenly was of the child I thought was my son. After 2 hours of conversation, I genuinely felt we'd become friends. When she hugged me goodbye, I felt a warmth and kindness that I hadn't realized I'd missed. The next day, I went out and bought essentials for my new home: a mattress, pillows, sheets, and basic kitchen utensils. I got a great deal on a 32-inch flat screen, and then it was time to find a job. I still had a chunk of what used to be a large amount of money, now just a solid nest egg, with most of it tucked into savings. My credit score was still around 800, so I was doing all right, but I knew it wouldn't last forever. I didn't need a high-level job, just something to keep me afloat. Using a temp agency, I managed to secure a position on the loading dock of a shipping logistics company. As the weeks passed, I settled into a new routine: breakfast, work, lunch, work, dinner, TV, either sports or a movie, and then sleep. Saturdays were for grocery shopping, and since I had a van, I'd always invite Don and Jacob to come along. It wasn't really a date, but I enjoyed spending time with both of them. Jacob was like a little buddy. If he wanted something from the store and Don said no, I'd add it to my cart, and we'd share it when we got back. Sundays, after Don and Jacob returned from church, were laundry days. We'd each take our laundry baskets down to the community laundry room. Dawn always had more to do since she was washing for herself and Jacob, so I'd hang around to play with Jacob and help Dawn fold her clothes. Spending time like this let us catch up and share the small moments of our day-to-day lives. Dawn and I began to look out for each other more. When she had to work late, she'd call me to pick up Jacob from daycare and babysit him until she got home. I got pretty good at putting him to bed and reading him stories until he fell asleep. Occasionally, a pang of sadness would strike, thinking about what might have been if things had gone differently with Tiffany, but I'd push those thoughts away. Dawn and I had exchanged keys to each other's trailers, so when I caught the flu and was laid up for a few days, she noticed I was missing and checked in on me. Seeing me sick, she changed my bedding, helped me into clean pajamas, and made chicken tinola, a comforting Filipino chicken soup. It was a kindness that surprised me. When I'd been sick during my marriage, Tiffany's help was always limited to the occasional Tylenol. As October neared, I realized that I wanted to be more than just Dawn's neighbor. Still, my doubts held me back from saying anything. Then, one Saturday while we were grocery shopping, a rude cashier gave me the push I needed. Dawn was ahead of me in line, and as she got her food stamps ready, the cashier muttered a snide comment under her breath. I saw Dawn's hand tremble, and she lowered her head. Suddenly, I felt a surge of protectiveness. Pushing past the candy racks, I pulled out my platinum card, a relic from my corporate days, and handed it to the cashier, telling her firmly, "She's no leech. She's my girlfriend, and I'll pay." After paying for her groceries and mine, we headed to the car. Dawn wiped away a few tears, and as she softly thanked me, she added, "You didn't have to do that." I shrugged, acting casual. "Do what?" She replied, "Paying for my groceries, and calling me your girlfriend." The way she said girlfriend in her soft accent warmed my heart. Looking over at her, I felt like I could tell her the truth. "Dawn, you're a good person. You don't deserve to be treated like that. I don't mind helping you and Jacob out." I paused, lowering my voice. "Besides, it doesn't have to be a lie, you know?" Her eyes widened in surprise. "What do you mean?" Standing there beside the shopping cart return, I made a bold move. Gently, I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her into a real embrace, one that conveyed my feelings. It wasn't just a friendly hug. "What I'm saying," I continued, "is that it's up to you if you want to be my girlfriend, because I'd really like to be your boyfriend." I'd put it all out there, taking a chance. She gently pushed back, slipping from my arms. My sudden move had clearly caught her off guard. Honestly, it surprised me too, but I wasn't sorry. It felt like a step forward, a sign that I was ready to leave behind the pain my ex-wife had caused me. I don't know," she stammered. "I need time to think about this." "I never expected," she trailed off. While Dawn got into the front seat, I focused on getting Jacob settled into his child seat. Soon, we were on our way, the car filled with the sound of the chirpy engine and Jacob munching on a small bag of animal crackers. When we got back to the trailer park, Dawn took Jacob inside while I unloaded the groceries. I finished putting away her things in her kitchen and then went to my own place to unpack my haul. I was just putting away my stash of Twinkies, a guilty pleasure of mine, when I heard a knock at the door. To my surprise and delight, it was Dawn. "Come in," I said with a smile. "But if you were my girlfriend, you wouldn't have to knock." She walked in, her face serious. "I asked Mrs. Meyer to watch Jacob so we could talk." Dawn took a deep breath, her tone earnest. "Paul, were you serious? About wanting me to be your girlfriend?" I took her hands gently, looking her in the eye. "Dawn, I swear on my grandmother's grave, I'm completely serious. Yes, I want us to be a couple." She shook her head, a look of disbelief on her face. "But why? Why would you want me? A guy like you could have anyone. I'm a broke, single, 32-year-old mother on food stamps. I don't have the perfect figure. I have physical scars. If I don't use a straw, I sometimes drool on the left side of my mouth. My left eyelid doesn't close completely, and I even have to wear an eye patch at night to keep it from drying out. How could you possibly want to be with me?" I felt a wave of frustration, not at her, but at the way her past had eroded her self-esteem. "Dawn," I said firmly, "that's your view, but it couldn't be further from the truth. From the day we met, I thought you were beautiful. And the more I've gotten to know you, the more I've seen how kind and genuine you are." I stood up and walked around the table to her, placing my hands on her shoulders. "On top of everything, I find you incredibly attractive. You said I could have any woman I wanted? Well, here's some news for you. I want you." I felt it was the perfect moment, so I leaned in and kissed her. It was different because of the left side of her mouth, but it didn't matter. It was real. After the kiss, I held her close, burying my face in her hair, and whispered, "You're perfect." She sighed, a hint of a smile breaking through. "Paul Scott, you're a wonderful man. And usually, men are wrong about a lot of things, but I want to believe you." Then, she gave her answer. "I'll be your girlfriend," she said softly, "but I'd like you to start coming to Sunday Mass with me and Jacob. If you're going to be my boyfriend, you need to be a good role model for my son." Pulling me close, she kissed me again, soft and lingering. I wasn't particularly religious. In fact, the last time I'd been in a church was for my wedding, and I hadn't wanted to go back since. But that last kiss gave me all the motivation I needed. "Agreed," I whispered, still a bit unsure what it meant to be a role model for a young boy. I was determined not to disappoint her if that's what she needed from me. My brand new girlfriend interrupted my thoughts, saying, "Now I have to go make dinner for Jacob, but tomorrow, I need you to take me back to the store. I want to pick up a few things to make a special dinner for my new boyfriend." She kissed me gently and added, "Please, take things slow with me, Paul. I really like you, but I've been through a lot. I worry your feelings might not last. I'm not some girl looking to rush things. If you want my heart, you'll need to be patient with me." With a warm smile, she headed back across the driveway. I couldn't help but notice her light step, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time since meeting Dawn, I felt a real sense of hope for the future. The next day, we arranged for Meyer, a retired hairdresser across the street, to watch Jacob while we went to the store. Wanting to make things easier, I stopped at an ATM on the way and withdrew $200, which I handed to her for groceries. She tried to refuse, but I insisted, reminding her that as her boyfriend, I wanted to help her out when I could. She quietly thanked me with a shy smile. When we got to La Manita Market, Dawn asked me to wait in the van. With Gallup's daytime temperature being mild, I rolled down the windows and laid down for a nap on the back seat. I was half asleep when I felt Dawn's lips softly pressing against mine. Smiling, I opened my eyes and pulled her close, murmuring, "I missed my girlfriend." I noticed the top buttons of her blouse were undone and playfully teased, "Were you trying to get attention in the store?" Dawn laughed. "Were you actually jealous?" Grinning, I kissed her neck and answered, "Of course I'm jealous. You're my girlfriend. I'm not letting anyone else steal you away." She gently pulled herself free, reminding me we had perishables in the bags that needed to be put away, then gave me another kiss and said, "You're doing a great job of being my boyfriend." Her words filled me with happiness. Back at our trailers, Dawn collected Jacob from Mrs. Meyer and sent the two of us to my trailer while she prepared dinner. Jacob and I watched a Disney movie and played a board game, Chutes and Ladders. With the windows open, we could smell the rich scent of roast pork and fresh-baked biscuits drifting over from her trailer. Finally, Dawn called us over. As we sat down, the incredible smells filled the room. Jacob, excited, was already at the table. Dawn served him first, and then she came over to me, laying a napkin on my lap with a light kiss on my cheek. "It's called machado," she explained, smiling. "It's a dish my mother taught me. It's made with beef chuck roast and strips of pork fat, marinated, seared, then braised with tomatoes. I also made fresh biscuits, and for dessert, there's champorado, a chocolate rice pudding." I was blown away. Dawn had truly gone all out. She was still standing beside me, so I wrapped my arms around her, hugging her close. "Sweetie, this must have taken you so much effort. What did I do to deserve this?" Kissing me lightly on the top of my head, she told me, "You're my man now, taking care of me and my son without my asking. This morning, you said as my boyfriend you could spoil me if you wanted. Well, it works both ways. As your girlfriend, I can spoil you if I want." Hearing that, I impulsively pushed back my chair and pulled Dawn into my lap. Then I asked Jacob, "Hey little buddy, is it okay if I kiss your mother?" With his mouth crammed full of Machado and biscuits, Jacob could only smile and nod enthusiastically. With one hand pressed to her belly to hold her steadily on my lap, I used my other hand to guide her mouth to mine and gave her the softest, most loving kiss I could summon. It might have lasted a minute or more. I couldn't really tell because I just did not want it to end. When our kiss finally ended, I whispered, "Aurora Dos Santos, get used to me, because I am absolutely falling in love with you." I now realized that I had everything a man could ask for. A decent job, a fine meal, a boy who looked up to me even if I wasn't his father, and most importantly, a good woman. One who would never betray me. I felt a pang of remorse at the thought, remembering how once upon a time, if only Tiffany had stayed faithful, I could have had most of this. Not the meal. She was no great cook, but it was not to be. Dawn's reaction to my declaration of love was to lean in and kiss me again, soft and tender like before. Finally, she broke the kiss off, a little drool trailing from the left side of her mouth. I dabbed at it lovingly with my napkin, kissing her again lightly. "You need to eat your Machado before it gets cold," she softly chided, then slid out of my arms and filled my plate for me. The dinner and dessert were delicious, of course. Afterward, I started cleaning up the dishes while Dawn took Jacob through brushing his teeth and getting him ready for bed. She came back into the kitchen just as I was about to start on pots and pans after finishing the dishes and silverware. Taking the dish towel, she wrapped it around my neck and pulled me in for a quick kiss, then smirked and said, "Your services are required in my son's room. Jacob wants you to help him say his good-night prayers." I walked to the back of the trailer to the little man's room, where I found him on his knees with his hands devoutly folded. Wanting me to join him in prayer, I had no choice but to take one for the team. I knelt down next to him, his voice serious. Jacob intoned, "God bless Mommy, God bless Lola and Lolo back in the Philippines, God bless Mrs. Meyer for taking care of me, and God bless Mr. Paul for playing with me and making Mommy happy again. Amen." He stopped and looked at me, and I realized that was my cue. Closing my eyes and folding my hands as Jacob had, I prayed, "God bless my sister Janet and my mom. God bless Mrs. Meyer for being a good neighbor. God bless Jacob for being my new friend." And I thought, what do I say about the boy's mother that God and Jacob would want to hear? I struggled to think as I prayed, "God bless Dawn for showing me I could care deeply again. Amen." I must have gotten it right because Jacob stood up and hugged my neck. I picked him up, tucked him in, and then kissed his little forehead. "Good night, little buddy." "Good night, Mr. Paul," he replied. Then he added, "Tell Mommy she still needs to kiss me good night too." I nodded, then walked back to the kitchen. Dawn turned to me as she was finishing up the pans. Placing my hands under her arms, I lifted her up, then lowered her down to my waiting lips. Damn, my life was becoming a Hallmark movie. "Jacob needs your kiss goodnight as the grand finale," I told her, setting her down. Before she could get away, I hugged her and whispered, "Don't be gone too long. You don't want your boyfriend to get lonely." She pointed at the living area. "You go sit on the couch and keep your lap open. Your girlfriend will be right back." Slipping out of my arms, she went to Jacob's room while I stretched out on the sofa and turned on the television to watch basketball. A couple of minutes later, I found myself distracted. We shared an affectionate moment, and things started to heat up. I ran my hands over her clothes, but when I tried to get a bit closer, she gently pulled my hand away. She quietly apologized. "I'm sorry, Paul. I really want you, but it's too soon for that. Please don't hate me." I wanted nothing more than to feel close to her, but I remembered her words. She needed time. I held her close, cradling her head on my chest, calming myself. Kissing the top of her head, I said, "I understand. I don't hate you. When I said I was falling in love with you, I meant it. I get that you need time, and you'll be patient." She buried her face in my chest, and I could feel her quiet tears. I gently comforted her, holding her until she calmed down. After a while, she stopped crying and stood up, giving me space to leave. I walked toward the door, and just as I was about to leave, she pulled me back for another kiss. Afterward, she opened the door for me, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "Thank you for being patient with me. If it makes you feel any better, I think I'm falling in love with you too." Hearing this made me feel incredible. I smiled, kissed her cheek again, and said, "That makes me feel a whole lot better. Good night, my darling." She smiled back and closed the door behind me. The next morning, I managed to get my body moving, but my mind was still preoccupied with thoughts of Dawn. When Tiffany and I were together, the relationship seemed great at first, but now I could see it for what it was, shallow. We were always having fun, but there wasn't much depth. Money had a way of covering up problems, but looking back, I realized that was a mistake. I couldn't let that happen again. With Dawn, I felt a real connection, and though we weren't being intimate at the moment, we were growing closer. We were both committed to making this work, and I believed in it. We talked about everything, our hopes, goals, and even our preferences. Gallup was just a temporary stop for us, and we hoped that, when the time was right, we'd move forward together. Though my desire to start a family was strong, I didn't want to rush things with Dawn. I knew I had to be patient. I'd already experienced the joy of having a child, even if it had been brief, and I was eager to have that experience again. But for now, I had to focus on building a solid foundation with Dawn. I spent some time with little Paul, but my wife, who often behaved dishonestly, took him away from me. Even that brief moment with the little one had changed me. I was already 37, and I wanted to experience such moments again before people started asking, "Is that your grandchild?" One warm Saturday afternoon in October, our neighbor, Mrs. Meyer, indirectly brought up the topic. I was sitting alone in my trailer after putting away my groceries, sipping on a cold drink, as it was a warm day and all the windows were open. That's when I overheard Don and Mrs. Meyer talking at the front door of his trailer. Don had apparently just paid Mrs. Meyer for babysitting that week, and they were making small talk until she shifted the conversation to Don's life. Mrs. Meyer, besides being a good sitter for Jacob, was known for being very opinionated and always giving unsolicited advice. "I've heard that Jacob is such a sweet boy," she said, "but he really needs a sibling, don't you think?" "A brother or sister would be nice," Don replied, "but I'm not in a position to." "Oh, I understand. But you're a great guy, and you've got a lot to offer. If you really want to have a full life, don't wait too long," Mrs. Meyer continued, giving advice about his relationships with Paul and what might be in store for his future. Though I couldn't see them, I knew that Dawn was probably a bit embarrassed, as Mrs. Meyer was the type to speak her mind loudly and confidently. Later that night, despite the heat and my struggles to sleep, I couldn't help but think about Mrs. Meyer's words. Her advice had made me reconsider certain things in my life. Even though I was tired, her thoughts lingered with me, and I realized I needed to think more about the future. I reached up to her gently, pushing my hands away. She asked, "Do you really love me?" Given the mood I was in, I could have given her a lengthy explanation of my feelings, but I opted for simplicity. "Of course I do." She looked at me seriously. "If that's true, then do everything I say, no questions." That was unexpected. My usually gentle girlfriend was now assertively giving me orders. Had Mrs. Meyer's talk with Don influenced her? I said nothing, but nodded in agreement. The soft glow of the streetlights filtered through the window, casting a faint light. I could see that Dawn had her hair up in a loose bun and was wearing her well-worn bathrobe. To me, she looked beautiful, just like that. She reached into the pocket of her robe, pulled out a sleep mask, and placed it over my eyes, blindfolding me. "Okay, things are getting interesting," I thought. "What about your ex-wife? What if she wants to reconcile?" I quickly shook my head. "No, she's nothing to me. After what she did, I'll never go back to her." Dawn asked, "What about the women in the trailer park?" Mrs. Meyer said several of them are interested in you, and they're prettier than me. I shook my head, trying to clear my mind. "Dawn, I don't know what you're getting at, but I'm all yours. I don't want anyone else." Then I remembered the promise I made during my prayers with Jacob. "I'll never leave you because you showed me I could love again." Dawn's lips gently met mine. Her soft voice followed. "I know it's been hard for you to wait, Paul. It's been hard for me too. Every time we kiss, I want you so badly, but there's so much trauma from my past. So many bad memories." This was the first time she had ever mentioned the pain from her past, and it shocked me. "Dawn, you know I would never force you to do anything you don't want to, right?" I said. She nodded. "Yes, I know. Since we met, you've been nothing but kind and loving to me. You make me happy, and even Jacob noticed it. But as much as I want to be with you, I don't feel ready yet. You've been so patient with me, and after Mrs. Meyer mentioned the other women, I wanted to give you something, even if just a little. I smiled. You've already given me more than I could ever ask for. Dawn paused and then said, I have another idea. I listened intently. Just lie back and listen, she said softly. She then shared with me some of the struggles she had faced in her past. I listened, feeling grateful that she was opening up to me. When I removed the sleep mask, I saw her tie up her robe. I have to get back to my trailer. Jacob will be waking soon. I can't leave him alone. She modestly clutched her robe closed, leaned down to give me a kiss, and said, I do love you, Paul. We'll be together soon, I promise. After our conversation, I found myself even more in love with Dawn. We had developed a little game with Jacob, where if I gave her a kiss, we would ask him what day it was, and if it was double kiss day, I would kiss her again. Jacob seemed to enjoy being part of our small, silly moments. As our relationship grew, I became more protective and wanted to show her how much I cared. I withdrew $2,500 from my savings and bought her a 2014 Toyota Corolla, so she wouldn't have to take the bus to her job at the drugstore anymore. The car wasn't perfect on the outside, but I had it checked by a mechanic to make sure it was in good, safe condition. When I gave her the car, Dawn laughed, then cried, and then took me into her trailer, where we shared a sweet, tender moment together. I also made an appointment and took Dawn to the eye doctor, where she was given medicated eye drops for her nighttime dryness, which helped her avoid using an eye patch. We also ordered her new glasses, and a couple of weeks later, her broken ones were replaced with some stylish Dolce & Gabbana tortoiseshell frames. Her look was transformed into something much more polished, and she looked absolutely stunning. At work, things were also going well. I had been doing a good job, and the company transitioned me from a part-time, temporary worker to full-time status with benefits. A month later, I got a raise and was promoted to shipping supervisor. I felt like I was moving up in the world, and things were starting to look bright. I decided to buy an engagement ring for Dawn, planning to propose to her at the company holiday party in December. My divorce wouldn't be officially finalized until March, but since reconciliation was out of the question, I figured there was no harm in getting engaged. Plus, it would make me incredibly happy, and I hoped that a diamond ring on Dawn's finger would ease any concern she had about our future together. During our Thanksgiving dinner, I asked Dawn to be my date for the company holiday party. She was a bit hesitant at first, thinking that none of her clothes were fancy enough. But that was an easy fix. I asked my good friend, Mrs. Meyer, for suggestions, and it turned out her sister, Betty, was a retired seamstress. Betty came over to take Dawn's measurements, and 2 weeks later, she returned with a gorgeous party dress. Mrs. Meyer kept it a surprise, only asking me to pay for it without letting me see it beforehand. On the night of the party, when I walked next door to pick up Dawn, Mrs. Meyer was already there, babysitting Jacob. When I mentioned that the party would probably end by midnight, she laughed and said, Paul, if you bring her home before morning, something's wrong with you. Then I heard Dawn's soft voice, am ready, Paul. I turned around, and my eyes nearly popped out of my head. The dress Betty had made for her was bright red, knee-length, and elegant, with one shoulder sleeve, leaving the other shoulder bare. The dress hugged her curves perfectly, clearly disproving her claim that she had no figure. I silently thanked my lucky stars that she was with me. I was wearing a charcoal-colored wool suit, which had been tailored in Hong Kong during my vice president days, but standing next to Dawn, I felt out of place. Mrs. Meyer had also styled Dawn's long, dark hair into a beautiful braided side bun, and she wore sensible red flats to match her dress. Thankfully, she had learned to avoid high heels after spraining her ankle in them a few times. I was thrilled to walk into the hotel ballroom with the most beautiful woman at the party. As expected, a few younger guys were checking her out. I slipped my arm around her and asked in a low voice, 20 feet past the entrance, and guys are already looking at you. Should I be worried? Taking my hand in hers, she kissed the back of it and replied, Paul, I'm not like anyone else. You never have to worry about me. We found 2 open chairs at one of the tables, and I pulled out her chair before getting us both glasses of champagne. The DJ welcomed everyone and began with a slow song. Dawn and I danced together and continued dancing when the next song started, until the music got faster and louder. We took a break and sat down. Soon, one of the younger executives from accounting asked Dawn to dance, but before I could feel any jealousy, she politely declined. Another executive from sales then asked her, and this time, I encouraged her to go for it. It was a slower song, and I watched closely as they danced. I kept my possessive instincts in check, but I kept an eye on them, making sure everything was respectful. I was ready to step in if anything went too far, but they didn't stay on the dance floor long before he bent his head down and whispered something in her ear. I was anxiously imagining what he was saying, but before my protective instincts could get the best of me, Dawn pulled away from him and came straight to our table, visibly upset. Sitting down, she angrily blurted out, "That man invited me upstairs to his room later, and he doesn't even know me." Inwardly, I breathed a sigh of relief, quickly switching my mood from jealous to concerned. "Are you all right?" I asked. "Yes, I'm fine," she responded. I told him the only man I'm interested in spending time with is the one who brought me here. It took me a second to process what she just said, my head spinning. I managed to ask, "Dawn, are you saying that?" Before I could get anything else out, she slipped into my lap, took my face in her hands, and kissed me. A kiss that made every man in love feel understood and cherished. "Yes," she whispered. "You've been loving and patient with me, doing everything you can to make me feel secure. I'm not afraid anymore, Paul." Her words were all I needed to hear. The second chapter of my life story began in room 538 of the historic El Rancho Hotel on Route 66. When we got into the room, I grabbed a small bottle of champagne from the minibar. It was a little pricey, but in that moment, I didn't care. I poured us each a glass and took her out onto the balcony. The sun had set, but we still had a wonderful view of the city skyline, illuminated by the glow of the building lights. As I stood behind her with my arms around her, I thought about how far I had come. Just months ago, I had been devastated by my wife's and brother's betrayal, left with half of what I had worked for. But now, I had reset my life. I had a decent job, and most importantly, I was with someone who had restored my self-confidence and who I couldn't wait to marry. Married to her. Yikes, I realized I still had something to do. The air was cooling, so I reached for her shawl to cover her. Then I knelt down on one knee and took the ring box out of my coat pocket. Lost in her thoughts, she was still facing the city lights, unaware. I mischievously tickled her, and that certainly caught her attention. She laughed and turned around. "Paul, what are you doing?" she asked, her sentence trailing off as she saw me on one knee holding the ring box. Her hands flew to her mouth in surprise. Before I could say anything, she burst into happy tears. "Rosa Don Santos," I said, my voice filled with emotion. "When I met you, I was at my lowest. You changed everything. I was overjoyed when you agreed to be my girlfriend, but when you made that choice to be with me, I realized I wanted to spend forever with you. Will you marry me?" She continued crying but nodded, holding out her left hand. I placed the ring on her finger, then picked her up and carried her to the bed. We spent the rest of the evening together, celebrating our love and commitment. The next morning, we woke up in time for breakfast. Afterward, Dawn requested a late checkout so we could spend a little more time together. When we returned home around noon, still in our party clothes, I knew it would raise some eyebrows in the Western Skies mobile home park. Given Dawn's wholesome, church-going reputation as a quiet single mother, I was sure people would have their assumptions about us. But everything changed when she showed off her engagement ring. Mrs. Meyer was thrilled, and Jacob was overjoyed that I was going to marry his mommy and be his new dad. Now that I had put a ring on Dawn's finger, there was no need to hide our relationship anymore. When Jacob was in the trailer with us at bedtime, we would keep things simple, just kissing and holding each other. And if those moments turned into something more, we knew that was okay. 5 Sundays later, Father Thomas gave a sermon on Genesis 1 verse 28, all about being fruitful and multiplying. At the end of the Mass, there was the monthly blessing of the parish's expectant mothers. When he called the pregnant mothers to come up for the blessing, Dawn stood up and joined them. It took every ounce of self-restraint for me not to jump up and shout for joy. She wasn't showing yet, so Jacob was a little confused. My hands were still shaking as I explained to him that he was going to be a big brother soon. After the blessing, Dawn came back, and I threw my arms around her. "I love you with all my heart," was all I could say. In a few weeks, I'd be completely free of Tiffany and able to marry Dawn, and just as importantly, become the father of our children. It was late February, about 3 weeks away from my divorce from Tiffany being finalized, and I couldn't wait to marry Dawn. My fiancée was now about 12 weeks along, and though she was small, her baby bump was already showing. I made sure to sing to it and kiss it every night. It felt so good to know that this baby was truly mine. There was no way in hell my brother could take this child away from me. Just as I thought things were going smoothly, one Saturday while we were out grocery shopping, my cell phone rang. Caller ID showed it was my younger sister Janet calling. This was very unusual. Janet lived in San Diego, and the last time we'd seen each other was at Mom's house for Christmas dinner, right before my marriage had fallen apart. I hadn't heard from her since I filed for the divorce, which wasn't unexpected. Janet and my brother Eric had always been close, so I figured she would support him. This call either meant there was something wrong with Mom, or that my brother needed money, or a kidney donor. If the call was about Mom, then we had something to discuss. If it was about Eric, there was nothing to discuss, and I would end the call immediately. "What's up, Janet? Is Mom okay?" "Yes, she's fine." "Great. Thanks for calling." "Paul, wait. Don't hang up." "Sis, you know I have zero interest in our brother, unless you are calling to tell me he's dead. If that's the case, we're done talking. Scott's not in the US. He wants his wife and kids back, so he's gone to India to beg Anothe to forgive him." I couldn't help but laugh at the idea that my brother could feel sorry for anything. I couldn't care less if that backstabbing jerk dies. If he's in India, I hope he gets bitten by a cobra. "Goodbye, Janet." I ended the call. Dawn wandered back over from the produce section and saw that I was upset. I explained how my sister had called, and I had cut her off. When my cell phone rang again, I saw it was Janet once more. "Geez Louise," I muttered. I answered the call, snapping, "I told you, sis, I don't care about Eric. Why the hell are you calling me?" "Paul, please don't cut me off. I'm not calling about Eric. I'm calling about Paul Jr." When she called him that, I could feel my warm, happy heart turn cold. His name is just Paul. He's not my son, in case you've forgotten. My name is no longer on the birth certificate. Eric's is. Would you like to hang up now, or do you want to upset me a little more? Damn it, Paul, listen. Eric wrecked your life, and I can't make any excuses for him, so I won't try. But our nephew never did anything wrong. He's innocent. He needs our help. I flared up and shouted, "Oh, please, Janet. That little boy is no relative of mine. He's dead to me, just like his parents." I didn't mean it when I called little Paul that. He was just an innocent baby after all, but mentioning his name reminded me of how much it hurt to lose him. I was so upset that I was shouting loudly, probably loud enough for anyone on the loading dock to hear. I shut my phone off, gathered up Dawn, Jacob, and our groceries, and we left the store. For the rest of the evening, the bad feelings dredged up by the call had put me in a foul mood, which clearly affected my two favorite people in the world. This made me feel even worse. During Jacob's goodnight prayers, as usual, he blessed his mom, his grandparents in the Philippines, and Mrs. Meyer. But when he came to me, he said, "God bless my new daddy, and please don't let him forget he loves me." At that point, I broke down, scooping Jacob up in my arms. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding him close, kissing the top of his head while sobbing, telling him how much I loved him. Dawn came in and gently pried Jacob from my arms, tucking him in. She led me out of the bedroom and then went back in to reassure him that I was just very sad, but would always love him. When she came out, she led me to our bedroom. For all the months I'd been in Gallup, I tried to be strong and kept my feelings about the betrayals and divorce locked down all by myself. My sister's call had literally ripped the scab off those old wounds. Emotionally crippled, I just stood there as my fiancé unbuttoned my shirt, removed my jeans, and laid me on the bed face down. Then, I felt her hands begin to rub my back, followed shortly by her lips kissing me from the base of my neck to my lower back. "You're going to be fine," she whispered in her soft Filipina accent, making it sound like together. Hearing her say that, I realized several important things. First, I was not alone. I had a loving woman and a sweet little boy who I'd soon be adopting. Second, My ex and my sister had no real control over me any longer. And third, I loved hearing my fiancé's accent. It was incredibly soothing. Rolling over on my back, I reached for her and pulled her to me. She was wearing the same light blue dress and rubber sandals that she had on when I met her, and she looked amazing. As I caressed her belly, I thought about my mom, now retired and living in the house I bought her in Fresno. She was probably sad since my brother and his family were now in India. She'd lost access to her granddaughters, whom she adored. Given she'd always despised Tiffany, I doubted she'd be involved at all with little Paul. Maybe it would make her happy to learn about her 2 new grandchildren. Kissing my fiancée, I asked her, "How would you feel about meeting my mother?" The next day, I called my mom and told her I wanted her to meet Dawn and Jacob. I was surprised when her response wasn't exactly enthusiastic, but she said it would be nice to see me and have a little boy in the house again. Dawn and I both got approval from our jobs for a week's vacation, and since the drive from Gallup to Fresno was 12 hours by car, we opted to fly. The weather was cool, so both of us were wearing hooded sweatshirts. Dawn's hoodie did a good job of hiding her baby bump, so Mom would be delightfully surprised when Dawn took it off. When the car service dropped us off, the house looked good, better than when I bought it for her. My mother had some nice landscaping done in the front. Mom greeted us at the door, gave me and Jacob a hug, but only shook Dawn's hand, saying "It's nice to meet you," and that was all. Given this was her future daughter-in-law, I suddenly got a cold feeling in my stomach. We went into the kitchen and sat down at the small table. Mom served Jacob a glass of orange juice and a peanut butter sandwich, which he happily accepted, while Dawn and I just asked for coffee. Ever the good hostess, only after she'd made sure everyone was served properly did she sit down so we could talk. The bad feeling in my stomach turned to an iceberg when Mom started talking. "You know, Paul, your divorce isn't final yet. Dawn here seems nice, and Jacob is a sweet boy, but don't you think it's too soon to get engaged again? I mean, it's been less than a year since Tiffany made her mistake." Mom had definitely played me. Jacob was sitting in front of me, so I couldn't yell. In a quiet voice, I growled, "Mother, I think Alzheimer's is affecting your memory. My ex-wife didn't make a mistake. She got pregnant by deliberately sleeping with my own brother. And no, it's not too soon. In a few weeks, my divorce will be final, and I'll be starting my new life with a woman who loves me." Mom leaned over and patted Dawn on the hand. "I'm sure Dawn is very loving and kind, but you had a good life before Tiffany's bad decision. I just don't think you should rush into things. After all, it's still not too late to consider reconciliation." That last word hit me like a Mack truck, and then it dawned on me. Something wasn't right. If my own mother, who absolutely detested my ex-wife, was urging me to take her back, then I knew I had been set up. Then I heard a car pull up outside, and I realized I was caught in an ambush. Sure enough, I heard the front door open, and 2 sets of feet entered. My mom said to Jacob, "Come on, sweetie. The grown-ups are going to be talking, and you'll be bored. Let's go find some nice cartoons to watch together." Mom and Jacob went into another room, and 2 women walked in. One was my sister Janet, holding little Paul, and the other was a woman I never wanted to see again, Tiffany. She greeted me softly, "Hello, Paul. You're looking good." I gave her a critical glance. Despite all the beauty treatments and Botox injections, her 33-year-old face looked haggard and worn. "I guess raising an 11-month-old infant alone could do that to you. Too bad." "Thanks. You look like crap," I snapped. Then I asked Dawn to step out of the room and call us a cab. It was time to leave. Before I could begin a rant about how things hadn't been easy, my sister handed the baby to Tiffany and slid a large brown envelope across the table at me. I didn't bother to open it. I just asked, "What the hell is this, Janet?" My sister explained, "It's a California Judicial Council form, Civ 11, the official request for dismissal of your divorce. Tiffany would like to reconcile before the divorce is final, but since you were the one who filed, you're the one who has to sign the request to dismiss the case. Once you fill that out and sign it, I can file it in court for you." This was all going way too fast. First, my mother and now my sister were pressing me to put the brakes on the divorce. I held up my hand. "Wait a minute. Something's not right. Who are you representing, Janet?" "Since little Paul is my nephew, I'm acting on Tiffany's behalf." "So, My own sister and mother were now on the side of my ex-wife, who destroyed my life. I guess my voice was getting angrier. Mom stepped in, taking the baby from my soon-to-be ex. Tiffany cut in, desperately pleading, "Paul, please think it over. You loved me, and Paul Jr. once. We can be a family again. The house is so empty without you." If she thought calling him Junior would soften me up, she was wrong. It only reminded me that the baby came from Eric, not me. I tried to keep my voice steady, but it rose. "Sis, first of all, take these papers and shove them up." I stopped myself, struggling to control my anger. "And as for you, Tiffany, the house feels empty? Wow, that's ironic, isn't it? Back when I was in the house, all that space was taken up by you and my brother betraying me. I was in the way." I glared now at all three women. "The three of you are absolutely delusional. Tiffany, in what possible reality did you think I would ever forgive what you did to me?" Then I heard a noise and looked to my left. Dawn was now standing just outside the kitchen entrance, her eyes filling with fear. She needed me. I took a deep, calming breath to control my anger. The last thing I needed was to get arrested on some trumped-up domestic violence charge. Janet was a lawyer after all, and after what she pulled today, I wouldn't put it past her to manipulate things like that. After what I said, Tiffany completely lost her composure, sobbing now. She got on her knees, grabbed my legs, and began pleading rapidly. "Paul, please listen to me. I made a huge mistake. I didn't love Eric. He was just a stupid fling. I ruined everything, and I'm so sorry. I'll always love you and want you to stay my husband." I looked down at her, stone-faced. She stopped, took a breath, and then the bargaining began. "If you stop the divorce, you can have everything back. The house, the cars, the bank accounts, the credit cards. I'll put everything in your name. I'll even sign a post-nuptial agreement. I'll give you all my email and social media passwords. We can go to couples therapy, anything." Wow. If I stayed married to Tiffany, I could be rich again. Get back almost everything she'd taken from me. No more trailer park, no more Volkswagen van, no more shipping supervisor job. It would also mean no more homemade Filipino food, no more Saturdays at the Loma Anita market, no more Sunday Mass, no more Dawn and Jacob, and no more self-respect. "Screw that," I muttered under my breath. Totally calm now, I responded slowly. "Tiffany, I have to hand it to you. This is indeed an interesting proposition. It's actually kind of funny when you think about it. See, if you'd made this offer before I left for New Mexico, I might have actually gone for it. Oh wait, you and Eric were still together then, weren't you? Bad timing, I guess." I shook my head, took another calming breath, and said, "Let me help you get your facts straight. You're a cheater who slept with my backstabbing brother behind my back and tried to hide it. Now you want me back? Let me make this clear. Unless you can give me back every single dollar you took from me, put that baby back where it came from, and stop messing with my brother, there's no coming back. As far as I'm concerned, both of you ceased to exist the night he betrayed me." Janet protested, "Paul, little Paul is innocent. You can't just walk away from him." I turned to my sister. "Oh, I can and I will. That goes for you as well, Janet. I loved and trusted you, yet you sided with the woman who destroyed my life. We're done." Finally, I turned to my mother. "Mom, you raised three of us single-handedly. I bought you this house because, frankly, you deserve it. That being said, what even motivated you to try this little stunt to keep Tiffany and me together? You sure weren't singing that song when I married her. Quite the opposite. You hated her, remember?" Mom was looking at the ground, crying softly as she held the baby. "Please, Paul, he's my grandson. He's innocent. I didn't do it for Tiffany, I did it for him. He needs a good father." I felt a lump build up in my throat. Now it was my eyes tearing up. "Let me remind you, mother dear, that baby has a father. It's just not me anymore. What's more, it will never be me. I honestly feel sorry for you, Mom. Eric screwed you over just like he did me. You've got 3 grandkids by 2 different mothers from my piece of a brother, but given how his wife took her kids out of the country, I doubt if you'll ever see 2 of them again. That leaves you with Tiffany, who's never been a paragon of virtue, and until you disown my little brother, you'll never see my children again. No matter what you do, you lose." Shocked, Mom gasped. What do you mean, there's more than just Jacob? Dawn stepped in, holding Jacob's hand. Paul, sweetheart, the cab's here. Her hoodie was now draped over her arm, so her baby bump was quite visible. I loved how she just let all three women know who the female alpha in the room was, and those 5 words were all it took. Yes, Mom, as you can see, Dawn has a little one in her belly. Looking at all of them, I gave my parting shot. The beauty of it is, I know for a fact it was me that put it there. I paused a second to kiss my fiancée, then we walked out, with only the sweet sound of Tiffany's sobs still audible behind us. This little ambush at Mom's place turned out to be a turning point for Dawn and me. The night she came to my trailer months before, ID let her tie me up, and she was totally in control, which made her feel safe and secure. On that fateful night, Dawn made me promise I was the only man she'd ever love again, and asked me if I'd ever reconcile with Tiffany. I swore to her that she was the only one for me, and that I'd never reconcile with my ex. Today's failed reconciliation ambush, however, gave incontrovertible evidence that no one, not my former wife, not my backstabbing sister, not even my misguided mother, could take me from Aurora Dos Santos. My heart was hers now. Am not an expert, but as an eyewitness to the event, I have a theory. By shutting down the 3 most influential women in my 37 years of life, my pint-sized Filipino princess with the facial imperfection had proven to herself how powerful she really was, a 411 irresistible force of nature. While our relationship was great prior to the estrogen-fueled showdown, the aftermath left Dawn much stronger emotionally, and it really opened her personality up. I soon realized I no longer had to worry about triggering Dawn's trauma. It was as if the door to her past abuse was now closed and locked, with the key lost. The morning after the confrontation, I woke up to the sight of my incredibly strong, pregnant fiancée kissing me. The sound of a rooster crowing, carried by the warm Palawan breeze, came in through the window of our hotel in El Nido, Philippines. The rooster was too late, as we were already awake. My bride, buried in a mountain of pillows for comfort, was exactly where I wanted her to be. As a wedding gift, ID surprised Dawn with a honeymoon back to the Philippines. Jacob was staying with his Lola and Lolo in Sanga City, and I didn't know who was happier about it, Dawn's parents or their grandson. Money-wise, the trip didn't do a lot of damage to my savings, maybe just a good-sized dent. Besides, this was all to please my Sambuanga princess and her precious belly cargo, who we decided to name Tala, Tagalog for bright star. With 3 months remaining in her pregnancy, I was sparing no effort or expense to pamper them. We would explore El Nido's white sand beaches, coral reefs, and limestone cliffs during the day, and dine like royalty in the evenings. Then every night before bed, I would rub her expanding belly with a lavender massage oil that a friend had given her at a baby shower at her parents'. Thanks to her newfound confidence, my fiancé had become even more adventurous and bold. As for work, we both quit our jobs right before the honeymoon. I'd gotten a call from my former boss asking me to join him in a new software as a service, SaaS, startup in California, at a salary that dwarfed what Dawn and I were currently making at our jobs combined. I happily accepted. After all, I had at least 2 kids' college funds to save for. With any luck, that number of children could significantly increase. Jacob was now legally my son. After a quick trip to the Roswell Correctional Center to visit Jacob's biological father, Danilo Santos, and in exchange for $5,000 cash wired to his uncle Mauricio, I was able to walk away with Danilo's signature relinquishing parental rights. I adopted Jacob not long after. The one proviso to my new job opportunity was relocation back to the Palo Alto area. In honor of what Dawn had gone through, I donated my trailer to the local women's crisis shelter to be used as an emergency safe house. Since Dawn's trailer had more room than Mrs. Myers, we gave it to her to thank her for everything she'd done for us. I had finally found someone I value more than anything I've ever had. She's here now, asleep next to me in this El Nido hotel bed, pampered, with my baby in her belly, and I intend to keep her. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.